to me. There we go. Okay, now we have sound. Sorry about that. That's why you start early. Therefore, you can get going and figure out and make sure everything works. Very exciting. Okay, so we're starting over again. Very exciting. You're ready for your road test. You want to pass your road test. It's the day before and the nerves are out of sight. As I said, I have lots of practice doing road tests. I've done my car license, straight truck, tractor trailer, bus. I've done all of those license tests. I had to do instructor's license tests. I've had to do lots of driving tests. And then when I moved to Australia, I had to do license tests in Australia. So I know what's happening in terms of the fear, the trepidation, the wanting to know. And so, yes, here we go. Road test. The other thing I need to say to you is you need to practice. You need to practice driving as much as possible. You need to get as much exposure to driving in different road conditions in different places and as much experience as you can to the environment and particular area where you're going to be driving in to be prepared for your road test. And again, I come back and I'll just say this quickly. Practice the fundamentals. Go to the parking lot and look at the video. I'll put the video down in the description for you after the video finishes here about the video on fundamentals. Do the 2x4 exercise. Throw the 2x4 down on the ground in the parking lot, and when you can drive over it on the right side and the left side of the vehicle, both backwards and forwards with the tires, then you're ready to go out and do your practicing of all of the slow speed maneuvers that you have. So, all of that, and just to finish up what I was saying about fundamentals. It doesn't matter what you do, whether it's driving, whether it's music, whether it's martial arts, you have to practice the fundamentals. If you practice the fundamentals, you're going to be ready for your road test. So we're going to address some of the questions that I was getting today. Now, just before we get into it here and get started, turn Facebook off, turn anything else off that's using the RAM and whatnot on your phone, on your computer rather. If you're watching it on mobile, turn those off as well so that, you know, as much RAM can be directed towards the live feed and those types of things. Turn anything off that's going to make noise and whatnot. And by all means, ask me questions, leave comments in the comment section here. Try and keep the comments clean. Let's be respectful of one another, and then we can proceed. I have a bit of a presentation for you, and I'll like I said, I'll address some of the questions. Now, one of the main concerns about the road test is people think that it's an automatic fail. And I get lots of comments about people as I failed because of one thing. No, you didn't fail a road test because of one thing. Driving authorities, regardless of whether it's the Department of Motor Vehicles in the States, whether it's in Canada, whichever driving authority is responsible at the provincial level, they all have a very specific criteria that they mark down on a checklist that the examiner uses to mark down, because they get challenges to road tests all the time and they have to have a checklist. So if the examiner tells you that your corners were too wide or you went around the corner too fast, or you bumped the curb on a parallel park, that's not the reason that you failed. Most of the time you failed because your driving wasn't up to the standard that is required for a driving test. And whatever you did, whether you went around the corner too fast or you bumped the curb when you parallel parked or whatnot, that was the tipping point. Up until that point, the examiner's kind of like, yeah, maybe no. And then you bump the curb, and then that is the tipping point where the examiner makes the decision that no, you didn't pass. And they tell you that, but that's not the only reason. Most of the time you fail a road test because your driving skills aren't up to a particular level. Now, I have a question from Willie P. He's asked me if there is a quota. No, there is not a quota. It's not like speeding tickets. It's not. There's not a quota. There are bureaucrats in the background behind the driving examiners who are crunching the numbers, and they're looking at the pass-fail ratio. And sometimes they will kind of say to the driving examiners, hey, you know, your pass rate is like 98%. It can't be 98%. You know, some people have to fail because not everybody can be a good driver that's going to pass a road test. So there's not a There's not a quota. It's not speeding tickets with the police department and those types of things. So there isn't a quota. What else can I say about that? And some people are not going to be successful in a road test and some people are. What I was going to say about that, the point that I was trying to think of, if you take driving lessons, and you don't have to take a lot of driving lessons, like you don't have to take a class and class and class, like 10 or 20 classes. You just need to take a couple of driving lessons. If you've been practicing with your parents or your friends or your guardians or whoever is helping you practice for your road test, and you take a road test, you go to the driving school, the local driving school, and do a mock road test, the driving instructor will be able to identify the gaps in your skills, techniques, and abilities that you need to pass a road test. So, for example, if you're not paying attention to the fact that you're making lane changes on solid white lines here in North America, because solid white lines are usually located near intersections, that means you can't change lanes because it's a dangerous maneuver, because it's at or near an intersection. And 40% of crashes happen at intersections, and this is why driving examiners and authorities don't want you changing lanes in or at an intersection. And I advocate that. Do not change lanes in an intersection. 40%, almost half of all traffic crashes, 40% of traffic crashes occur at intersections. So, don't change lanes in intersections, and oftentimes there's a solid white line at the intersection that's going to indicate that you should not be changing lanes at intersections. So do not change lanes at intersections. And if you do that on a mock road test, the driving instructor will say to you, you can't change lanes on a solid white line. So don't do that, because you will get dinged for that. Hey, Sam. My friend Sam, he's a driving instructor in New York City, and he's up late because it's 10 o'clock there. So when you do driving, and if you're only watching the videos here, go to a driving school, take a mock road test, and have the driving instructor give you specific information for the driving test that you're going to be taking at the location where you're going to be taking it. I cannot stress that enough. Take a mock road test. It's worth the money, because it will almost guarantee that you will pass a road test, or the driving instructor will say, you need a lot of work and you're not ready for a road test. And if you're not ready for the road test, it's better to postpone your road test and do it at a later date than it is to go and try and fail, because your self-confidence, it's just too hard on your self-confidence. So, do a mock road test. If you're not going to take driving education, you're not going to take driving lessons with an instructor, go and do a mock road test before your road test. So, okay, so Willie P asked me this question. He said, so if driving examiner passed 98% of people and were told to fail some of my driving was really good. Okay, now the other point about that, Willie P, is driving schools have a very high pass rate. Know that. The pass rate at most of the driving schools that I worked at is around 96%. It's very high for driving schools, because there's a relationship between driving examiners and driving schools. Driving schools kind of teach driving examiners what to expect, because we're the experts. We're the people teaching kids how to drive. Not kids, but we're teaching drivers how to drive. Sorry about that. We're teaching you how to drive. So, sorry, lost my train of thought there. So go to a driving school. It's going to increase your chances exponentially. And the other thing is I don't like talking about failing. You were unsuccessful. The only time you fail is when you give up and don't try anymore. If you don't get it till the second attempt, you didn't really fail. You're just unsuccessful on attempt. Okay, so somebody else had a question. I did the whole learning course, so it is better chance. Yes. Hey, Renee. Tips for turns and steering straight. Okay, right turns, you have to get to the right speed before you get to the right turn. You have to be, in the States, you have to be 10 to 12 miles an hour. In Canada, you have to be 10 to 15 miles an hour, depending on how big the intersection is. If you're in a residential area, the slower you got to go. Any turn, whether it's a left turn or a right turn, most left turns you're going to stop before you do the turn to give the right of way to oncoming traffic, but right turns you're going to slow 10 to 12 miles an hour in the States and 10 to 15 kilometers an hour. That is probably the most prominent problem that new drivers face is that they don't get the vehicle down to speed first. And I will come back to this again. You have to shoulder check every time you move the vehicle laterally for every turn. So you need to shoulder check minimum 2 times. You need to shoulder check approximately half a block before the turn, and you need to shoulder check again immediately before the turn. So know that. Now, I'm just going to flip over to the PowerPoint presentation. I'll go through the PowerPoint presentation, and then I'll come back to any questions. Was there anybody that I missed that had a question? Angel asked me, in the U.S., is it legal to practice by yourself in your own vehicle before getting your license? No, you have to have a mentor. To practice driving a motor vehicle, regardless of class, you have to go and write a knowledge test at the local DMV. You have to get a learner's license, and you have to work with a mentor. There has to be an experienced veteran driver in the car with you, and that's how you practice in order to move to the next phase. Now, I believe that most U.S. states, and Sam might be able to comment on this, have graduated licensing programs. So you have a learner phase and you have a novice phase. And the learner's phase, most licensing centers now are approximately a year. So you have to have it for a year. So what I say to students is go and get your learners as soon as possible and get that clock ticking, because most of the time it's just a calendar year from the time that you start till the time that you are able to move to the novice phase. There isn't a certain amount of practice that you have to do. So that's that part. Tips for judging distance. Obligate, look at the video, and again, I'll put it down in this in the description afterwards on judging gap. That will give you information. Again, so Rupert, I haven't gone to Sam's driving school. Well, Sam's on here, Rupert. If you want, if you want to leave him a comment, you can talk to him. So, flipping over to the PowerPoint presentation, and I'll go through that, and I'll just quickly go through some of the stuff that I already kind of talked about in the presentation here. So, okay, why drivers fail a road test? As I said, the percentage of fails is low. It's not very high. And the other thing that I'll say about failing a road test is that most drivers do not fail a road test for one thing specifically. They usually fail because their driving is not up to a certain level of competency. Now, as I said just now, in order to practice driving, you have to pass a knowledge test, and the knowledge test consists of signs, signals, road markings. It consists of terminology such as painted islands, right-of-way, and those types of things. You have to know how the right-of-way works at four-way stops, at roundabouts, and at intersections, both controlled and uncontrolled intersections. And then you have to know about the driving task, and the 6 components of the driving task are the driver, the vehicle, the road, traffic, weather, and light. Those are the 6 components for driving that you are up against when you're learning how to drive. And this is why I advocate getting as much practice as you can before the road test. 4 components of any road test, regardless of class, regardless of where it is in the world, all road tests have the same 4 basic components. Speed management, you have to maintain speed, and that is you have to drive the posted speed limit, you have to drive the flow of traffic or the capability of the vehicle, whichever is less. Those are the 3 criteria for how fast you're going to drive. If you watch the mock road test video here on the Smart Drive Test channel, how to pass a road test, in the residential areas, I seldom hit 50 kilometers an hour, 30 miles an hour. So if you're driving in high pedestrian areas or areas where the roadways aren't very wide and there is parking, you're not going to hit the posted speed limit. So you have to drive to the conditions of the road for speed. Space management. You have to stay away from other vehicles, other road users, and other fixed objects on the roadway. You never want a driving examiner on your driving test to go, because if the driving examiner does that, that is not good. That's just not good at all, and it's unlikely that you're going to recover from that. Number 3 is observation, and you have to observe. You have to have a scanning pattern. You have to look forward. You have to look in the mirrors, usually the center mirror, back, forward, the wing mirrors, back, forward, check your gauges, and that is your scanning pattern. And you have to repeat that scanning pattern every 10 to 15 minutes, or 10 to 15 seconds rather. Sorry, not 10 to 15 minutes, 10 to 15 seconds. And then you have to communicate with other road users, and we communicate with other road users in several ways. We communicate with other road users via the signals, via the lights, hand gestures, appropriate hand gestures. You can't tell other drivers they're number one on a road test. That's definitely not good. Communication and the position of your vehicle on the roadway indicates intent. So those are the ways that you communicate to other road users what you are doing, and you have to communicate well in advance. Whenever you're making a turn, you have to signal approximately half a block before the turn, and you have to signal every time you lane merge. Okay, requirements of a road test. You have slow speed maneuvers that you are required to be competent in for the purposes of a road test. Most road tests are going to be a parallel park, and some places will make you park in between two cars, but that's rare. If they are in a big metropolitan area, they're not going to make you parallel park between two vehicles. Usually what they're going to have is a closed circuit area someplace away from other traffic, and they're going to make you park between posts. Now, I can't say that generally to cover everybody. Some places you will have to park between two vehicles, but it's rare, and you can find that out from local driving instructors whether you have to park between two vehicles. But most of the time you just have to parallel park behind another vehicle. You have to be knowledgeable in a 3-point turn, 2-point reverse turn. You have to be able to stall park or back into a parking space, and you may or may not have to do U-turns. U-turns are not part of the North American culture, the driving culture, so it's unlikely that you're going to have to do a U-turn. Now, other ones, requirements of a road test, you have to be able to hold the vehicle in the lane, in the center of the lane, and you simply do that by looking farther down the road. And again, look at the video here on the channel on centering the vehicle or positioning the vehicle in the lane. You have to observe, you have to do shoulder checks. You have to do a minimum of 2 shoulder checks for every time you move the vehicle laterally. Anytime you do a lane merge, anytime you move sideways in a parking lot, anytime that you make turns, you have to shoulder check. Now, responding to changing situations. Traffic is dynamic. Traffic is ever changing. You can have the same roadway at a different time of the day. The weather is completely different. The light is completely different. The vehicles on the road are completely different. You have to be able to respond to those changing conditions on the roadway for the purposes of a road test. And this is one of the things that driving examiners are looking for. Are you doing the same static thing all of the time? Or are you looking at the traffic situation, determining what the traffic situation is doing, looking at the traffic patterns, predicting the traffic patterns, and responding accordingly? There's the funny story about a driving school in Vancouver that was teaching people just on the road test, and the student comes down the road and there's construction on the road, and the driving examiner tells the student to go right, and the student looks at the driver and goes, no, we go right here, we go right. We go the other way, sorry. So you can't just practice the test route and expect to pass a road test. You have to be able to respond to changing traffic situations. Now, this is key for a road test. If you are in doubt in any situation, stop the vehicle. Simply stop the vehicle. Do not plow forward. If you go around a corner and a pedestrian steps out in front of you, or another vehicle gets in your path or whatnot, just stop, wait for the situation to clear, and then continue. Do not be afraid to stop the vehicle. Do not plow forward, because if you execute a dangerous action on a road test, you could potentially fail your road test. So when you're in doubt, if you're in doubt on a road test, simply stop. Emergency vehicles. If an emergency vehicle comes, you must pull over to the closest shoulder and stop. Most of the time, that closest shoulder is going to be the right shoulder, but if you're on a multi-lane road, you could move over to the left to make a path for the emergency vehicles. Abilities for a road test. Specific skills. 2 hands on the steering wheel. You must have 2 hands on the steering wheel unless you're driving a manual transmission. You must stop in traffic or behind traffic so you can see the wheels of the vehicle in front of you making clear contact with the pavement. Stopping at the correct position at intersections, at stop-signed intersections, before the stop line, before the crosswalk. If there isn't a crosswalk but there's a sidewalk, imagine the sidewalk extending out into the roadway. And if there isn't a crosswalk, or there isn't a stop line or a crosswalk, where the two roads meet. So those are the 3 stopping positions at stop lines. Amber traffic lights. This is another reason that you need to practice. No vehicle will stop in its own length if you come up to an amber traffic light, an orange traffic light. If you're within 1 vehicle length of the intersection, you can go, but you need to go through the intersection with caution. You need to be scanning. You need to be covering the brake as you're proceeding through the intersection. If you're farther back than 1 vehicle length, then you need to bring the vehicle to a stop, and sometimes that might mean a fairly aggressive braking situation. So you need to get a bit of practice with orange traffic lights, and only by exposure to a lot of driving are you going to get practice with orange traffic lights. Controlled and uncontrolled intersections. In this day and age, there are very, very few uncontrolled intersections. Now, just know at some driving centers where you're going to be taking your test, driving examiners will say at the controlled intersection, turn left. And the reason that they do that is they want you to figure out whether it's a stop sign, whether it's a yield sign, or whether it's traffic lights. So they'll say at the next controlled intersection, turn left. Or they might say at the intersection, which usually implies an uncontrolled intersection. So simply at the next street, you're going to turn left. Okay? You have to understand right of way at yield signs, give way signs. If you're in Australia and other places in the world, they have give way signs. And you have to understand right of way, mostly at intersections. You have to understand right of way with pedestrians and those types of things. So these are all the abilities, skills, and techniques you need for a road test. Driving lessons. I talked about this in the introduction. You don't necessarily need to take whole lessons, but I strongly advocate you taking at least a mock road test and getting feedback before you go for your road test from a driving examiner. As I said, driving examiners have specific knowledge about the area where you'll be taking your road test, and they have specific knowledge about the very specific skills and abilities that you need to pass the road test at that driving center on the roads in the immediate surrounding area of that driving center. Practice, practice, practice. I cannot stress this enough. Get as much driving experience as you can, not only in different driving environments, different weather, different vehicles. As much exposure you can get to driving is going to make you better overall. It's the same thing if you're learning how to play music. The more practice you have with the instrument that you're learning how to play, or learning to sing, the more you sing. Driving is no different, and you need to master the fundamentals. And I really strongly advocate going to a parking lot and doing reverse figure eights and doing the 2x4 exercise where you put it down on the road and try and drive over it forwards and backwards with the left and right set of tires. Is there a quota? To answer the question, no. We talked about that at the beginning. There isn't a quota. There is a fairly high pass rate. It's above 90%. If you're going to a driving school, it's even higher. So there isn't a quota. And most people who are unsuccessful at road tests are unsuccessful because their overall driving is not up to a certain standard. There are situations that you execute a dangerous action, and sometimes people who are good drivers don't pass the road test because something happened and they simply could not handle the situation, or the situation went south. And unfortunately, there's situations where drivers that shouldn't pass, everything went right on that day and they did pass. So there isn't a quota, to answer that question. Now, I get taken to task a little bit on this. In the parallel parking video, I did say that if you hit the curb, if you bump the curb, I should clarify that, when you're parallel parking, you won't fail the road test. Now, if you hit the curb and the body rocks back and forth on the chassis, that's a definite fail. If you push the tire up over the curb, that's a definite fail on a parallel park. If you strike a fixed object, the curb is not a fixed object, but if you're, say, bay parking, you have to back into a parking space. In most driving centers, you're going to have to back into a parking space. If you strike a fixed object at a driving center, like the concrete barrier, that is a definite fail. So if you're bay parking, you're backing into the parking space, it's better to be out a little bit than it is to back up and risk striking the concrete barrier. So always stay out a little bit when you're doing that. And the newer vehicles, I noticed this weekend when I rented a new vehicle, that when you put it into reverse, the mirrors actually go down and are pointed at the ground. They readjust automatically. So that's kind of a new feature. You cannot use reverse cameras to back up. You have to turn your body and look out the back window when you're backing up for the purposes of a road test. the good, the bad, the ugly. I got ahead of myself and I said sometimes bad drivers pass and sometimes good drivers fail. And that's because of the way the traffic works out. I've had good drivers who have not been successful because something went wrong. For example, some years ago, I had a good driver who got the traffic lights confused, and there was a left turning traffic signal and the light went green for the through traffic and the turning light was still red, and the driver tried to proceed, and unfortunately moving through a red light caused that driver to fail his road test. So unfortunately there are some examples of good drivers not being successful on a road test. Unsuccessful attempts. I don't like using the word you failed your road test, because you didn't fail, you didn't give up, you're going to go back, you're going to give it another go. So unsuccessful attempts, you were simply unsuccessful. And the other thing that I say, there's no learning and winning, but there is a lot of learning in being unsuccessful. And we it's kind of like Batman said, why do we fall down? We fall down because we learn how to pick ourselves up again. We do. And, if you're unsuccessful on your road test, go home, eat Doritos, lay on the couch for a day and be miserable and blame the world. But after the day, get up, carry on, and do it again. And, do the work that you need to do to be successful on your road test. Sometimes, it's not going to work out, and it's okay to be down for a day and be miserable. But, get back up and carry on with the road test and getting your license and being successful. So how do you do that? The fundamentals. Learn the basics. Practice the basics. Spend time doing the boring stuff in the parking lot, doing forward figure eights, reverse figure eights, doing speed control, mastering the primary controls. The primary controls are the steering wheel, the brake, and the throttle. So do all of that. Practice, practice, practice. Practice your turns. Practice in driving in the areas in and around the driving centers. Now, know that you can't go into the driving centers during opening hours. You can go in on the weekends and those types of things and practice your reverse bay parking and whatnot. So try to get as much exposure in and around the area where you're going to be taking your road test, and that will help as well. And again, in the weeks leading up to your road test, try and stay in the same vehicle. If you're out a few weeks from your road test, then you can move around in different vehicles. But in the weeks leading up to the road test, make sure you stay in the same vehicle that you're going to be doing your test in. That's just going to be making it a lot easier. So if you're going to be taking your road test in a driving school car, try to work in the driving school car. If you're going to be taking the road test in your parents' car, then work in your parents' car. Okay, driving examiners are people. This kind of goes back to what I was saying before about, sometimes not everybody gets a fair shake. They have quirks and pet peeves. I was talking about solid white lines before. There was a driving examiner in Victoria, BC here, and that was his quirk. His quirk was that, people crossing over solid white lines. We have a driving examiner here in Vernon, BC. When drivers are taking a higher class license, if they don't keep it centered in the lane and they, move over onto they get close to the lane dividing markings, 5 points every time. So, they have bad days too. They have another driving examiner depending on what day of the week it was. And, sometimes they get bored and they're not paying attention. So, it's hard because they're sitting there with a clipboard and you don't know whether they're paying attention or not. So do what you need to do and just keep going forward with what you've practiced in order to pass your road test. Focus on what you're doing. Try not to get distracted by what the driving examiner is doing and what he or she is writing on the clipboard. So road test day before road test day, get a good night's sleep. Bring your documentation. I always indicate that you should bring at least, you need 2 pieces of picture identification. If you wear glasses, bring your glasses. If it's the summertime like it is now, bring sunglasses if you need sunglasses to drive. I know that I do because I'm very photosensitive, and if I don't wear sunglasses while I'm driving, it's kind of painful. And bring money. Most of these driving tests are not free. You need to bring money. So bring money when you go into the driving center. If there's parking for the where you're going to be taking your test, make sure you park in that set of stalls and make sure you back in, because it's going to give you a bit of practice before your road test. in that way you don't have to back out of the space to start your road test, and it's just going to be a lot easier for the first 5 minutes, because remember, the first 5 minutes is going to be the hardest because it's new. You just met the examiner, they're getting in, they're doing their little pre-trip inspection and whatnot. And if you do take your parents' car, on that note of pre-trip inspections, make sure you do a pre-trip inspection on the vehicle before you leave. And again, I'll put that video down in the description as well to do a pre-trip inspection. At minimum, check the lights and make sure that the signals are working, the horn is working, and make sure the seat belt and the seat work on the passenger side, because if none of that works, the examiner won't take you out for a road test. Keep going until the examiner tells you to stop. If you made a mistake, the examiner may not even have seen the mistake, so just keep going on your road test. And all you have to do for your road test is take away the examiner's right to fail you. So if your driving is up to a certain standard, it's very unlikely that the driving examiner is going to fail you. So take away the examiner's right to fail you. That's all you have to do on a road test. Nothing more, nothing less. So good luck on road test day. And I'll just come back here. There we go. So see if we have any questions. All right, guys. So, does anybody have any more questions about any of that I went over in the presentation? Because I think that people have some nerves about driving. Now, one of the things I just want to clarify that I will just go over again here is that you are not, it's very unlikely that you're going to fail a road test for one particular action. Unless it's a dangerous action, like you're charging a pedestrian at an intersection, or you cut another vehicle off because you didn't scan properly, then yes, there is a possibility that you could potentially fail a road test for one thing. But most of the time when you're unsuccessful on a road test, it's because your driving isn't up to a specific level. So know that you need to have your driving up to a specific level for the purposes of a road test. And again, I come back to stressing that you need to practice the fundamentals. Go to a parking lot, do the fundamentals. And one of my favorite skills is to go and get some of those 36-inch pylons and have the student do reverse figure eights. The other thing you can do is find a back alleyway. We have them here in Vernon, and I know they have them in lots of other places in cities and whatnot, and to back up in a straight line for a good distance, because if you can back up better, that gives you a real awareness of where the vehicle is in space, and backing up for long distances is the best thing that you can do. Jackie, you are most welcome for anything I can do to help you. So practice the fundamentals, practice backing up, practice your slow speed maneuvers. I was talking about reverse figure eights. I apologize about that. I dropped off there halfway through. Go to a parking lot, get 2 of those 36-inch pylons, put 2 of them, 1 at each end, and then do reverse figure eights. When you can do reverse figure eight successfully and with confidence, then I can say with a fair degree of certainty that you will be ready for your road test, because doing reverse figure eights is one of the most difficult maneuvers that you can do in a vehicle. Not only that, it kind of messes with your head a little bit. So that's one of my favorite techniques, is to teach students how to drive and how to get a better sense of the vehicle. As well, it gives you a better sense of the steering, the brake, and the throttle, because those are the primary controls, and you have to be able to demonstrate a high level of competency with those primary controls. Okay, shoulder check turning left. We've had this question a few times, and I've done a video about that. And I asked this very question on when I did my instructor's license. Why do we have to shoulder check when turning left? No sooner did I ask that question than a day later I was making a left-hand turn into the Ottawa General Hospital, because I took my instructor's license in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. The driving instructor told me that you have to shoulder check for the purpose of the road test, and I was like, well, why? And of course, other people asked me that question too. And no sooner did I do that, I was turning left, and a cab cut off on the inside of me and sped past me when I was making a left-hand turn. As well, in these larger metropolitan areas where you got lots of traffic and whatnot, you're going to get these crazy cyclists who do that same thing. They come up in on the left side of you and they just kind of sneak in there. And I've had cyclists do that. Now, maybe leave a comment and see if anybody else has had this happen. And this is the reason that you need to shoulder check on a left turn. The other reason that we're getting people to shoulder check on a left-hand turn is so that it becomes second nature, because there's certain habits that you want to develop and you want to create when you learn how to drive, so that when you get tired, when you get distracted, when you're thinking about something else, you're still implementing the observation patterns and skills that you need to be safe. Because if you're in a parking lot, you're going to need to be able to scan left, because there might be somebody standing there, there might be a child who got away from his parents, or there might be a shopping cart or something else there. So shoulder check left. You need to shoulder check left to observe properly and to see what other vehicles are doing. Yes, prepare for the unexpected, because the unexpected is going to happen. I mean, even Sam and I, who are experienced drivers, who are driving instructors, I have tons and tons of experience. I've driven trucks, I've driven buses. You get tired, you get distracted, you make mistakes. So you need to put the habits in place so that when that happens, you're still doing the things that you need to do to be safe on the roadway and be defensive. It's the same thing as what I advocate for drivers in a road test. You have to stay back from the other vehicle in front of you approximately 1 vehicle length, so that you can see the tires of the vehicle in front of you making clear contact with the pavement. If you look at the video here about how to defend against being rear-ended, that's one of the ways that you defend against being rear-ended, is maintaining more space in front of your vehicle. It's the same thing when you're being tailgated. Maintain more space in front of your vehicle, because what you're doing is you're driving for yourself and you're driving for other people as well behind you. So do that as well. How can I improve and not do wide turns? Okay, so what you need to do, Jackie, is you need to go and do the 2x4 exercise in the parking lot. What I need to say is you need to go and get some of those 36-inch pylons from your local rental shop. You can rent those, and they're only about $10 for 3 or 4 of them. They're very inexpensive. Go to the parking lot and do the exercises in the Learning Fundamentals video, and that will help you with all of those challenges that you're having with your turns being too wide. And what else? So with your turns being too wide, because you're dealing with, Jackie, the blind spots around the vehicle, and the blind spots are fairly big, especially on the passenger side. That's probably one of your most difficult blind spots, because it's approximately 12 feet off the passenger's door, and then it's 8 feet to the door. Not 8 feet, sorry, it's about 6 feet. So it's about 12 or 14 feet, depending on how big the vehicle is, out on the passenger side of the vehicle, and you're trying to curb park and do those types of things, and you're trying to do turns. So go back to the fundamentals, practice the forward figure eights, the reverse figure eights, doing reversing in parking lots. And with some of those pylons, if you bang the pylon, it's not a big deal. So you can figure out where the car is in space, and that's the best thing that I can suggest that you do. I shoulder check too much. Okay, you only need to shoulder check twice for turns, twice for lane merges. So don't shoulder check more than that. So approximately half a block, one time immediately before the turn. Unless the traffic changes, then you don't need to shoulder check again. So Johanna, thank you so much. Well, what if an emergency vehicle comes and you pull to the right? Do you have to yes, you should put your signals on when you're pulling over to the right. You're going to do an emergency stop. So signal your intent, whether you're going to move left or right, depending on which side of the roadway, but make sure you get the vehicle pulled over and try to get it stopped. Obviously, you don't have to come to a complete stop if the emergency vehicle has already gone past, but do your best to get over and get it stopped, because unfortunately, I've had students who have been unsuccessful on a road test because they didn't stop for emergency vehicles. So the emergency vehicles are kind of the fly in the ointment on a road test, because they can show up at any time. Keep in mind as well that emergency vehicles travel in groups. So if you have an ambulance come out or you have a fire truck come out, sometimes there might be another emergency vehicle, police and whatnot. So know that they travel in groups. Okay? Nerves, okay? Nerves are part of driving. And if you're feeling nervous about driving, try to stay in low traffic density places. That's going to make your driving a little easier than it is if you're trying to drive in high density places on multi-lane roads and those types of things. So what I suggest is that you go to a residential area, get more comfortable in the residential areas and low traffic areas, and that will build your confidence driving around these low density areas where there isn't much traffic, there aren't very many other road users and whatnot. And then as you build your skill and build your confidence, then you can move out to other areas and take on more challenges. Now make sure you work with other experienced drivers as well, because they can help you. Because the purposes of a mentor, the purposes of a teacher is to both help you with the situation, so teach you, take you outside of your comfort zone, but if something happens and they need to intervene, their job is also to act as a safety net, to intervene and say, hey, listen, do this, do that, or take control of the steering wheel or whatnot. Okay, how do you anticipate buses when they might pull out? Every time I go, the bus flashes to pull out as soon as I get in. Where are you? Okay, so the buses are supposed to wait for you. Now, Sam might be able to say something about the buses in New York. You have to be careful with municipal buses. If they're at a bus stop and you need to keep an eye on them, how long they've been at the bus stop, whether they've had enough time to let passengers off and let passengers get back on the bus. And again, that's one of those dynamic situations that you're going to have to be prepared for on the purposes of a road test, is transit buses, because transit buses run in the right-hand lane. If there's only 2 lanes, or if you're in Melbourne, for example, Australia, you got a tram running down the middle of the road. It's the same thing as a bus, right? So you're going to have to work with that. And again, I advocate getting exposure to that, driving in those areas as much as possible, and getting a sense of what the buses are going and how you can get around them. Okay, how do I drive when it's dark at midnight? Okay, there's a video here on driving at night. And at night, when you drive at night, the farther you get away from urban areas, the harder it's going to be, because you don't have overhead street lights, you don't have auxiliary lighting and those types of things, and you have to rely more and more on your headlights on your vehicle. And the more you have to rely on the headlights on your vehicle, the more difficult it is, and you have to pick out landmarks in the geography. Now, know there are different kinds of landmarks to drive with at night. Road signs are reflective, and road signs are often very near the roadway, so those will give you some indication of where the roadway is. So you have to look down the road and try and figure out where the roadway is going. Other traffic will give you an indication of where the roadway is, because most of the time, at least we hope most of the time, that the other traffic is actually driving on the roadway. So take note of where other traffic is, and you can follow the other traffic and drive on the roadway at night. The other piece that I advocate at night is turn the dash lights down on your vehicle, because if you have those bright lights shining in your face, it causes distraction, it causes fatigue, and it makes it more difficult to drive. If you turn down the dash lights, you can focus out the front windshield, the windscreen, and find the landmarks that you need to navigate and find the roadway at night. All right, should I drive with my headlights on all the time? Can I leave my fog lights? You can leave your fog lights on, but it's not really recommended. Just turn them off at night, because it just adds extra light, and it's difficult for other drivers, especially with these new vehicles with these halogen lights and blue lights and those really bright lights. A lot of times you think that they have bright lights on, and when they're simply only low beams. But yeah, you should drive with your headlights on at night for sure. You have to have your headlights on to see, and for other vehicles and other traffic to be able to see you. So know that at night you need to do that. Now, do have a look at the video on night driving here on the channel, and again, I'll put that down in the comment for you after the video goes up, because it's a good half-hour drive where I take you out and I show you the landmarks that I'm looking for when I go for a drive. So have a look at that. Okay, just looking to see if there's any other questions here that we could answer. Shoulder check, turning left. Yes. And thank you for all the lovely comments. So, okay. Okay. All right, Angel, learner's license a bit too much. Available to every time you need to drive. Seems too limiting. Yeah, I know, Angel. There are restrictions on learning how to drive, no doubt. That the GLP program has imposed restrictions on people, and it makes it difficult to drive. Okay, so if there's no more questions, I guess we'll just leave it there. And by all means, you can get a hold of me. You can send me an email. Tips on driving on the highway. Okay. Okay, so tips for driving on the highway. There is a video here I did on driving on freeways, driving on highways. Look far down the road. Try and predict traffic pattern as best you can. Try and look at the other vehicles that are on the road, whether they're large trucks and buses, because know if it's hilly, if the truck or the bus is going uphill, it's going to slow down on you. Know that you need to get by on passing lanes, and also pay attention to the road markings, because the road markings will tell you when it's safe to pass and when it's not safe to pass. If it's a solid line down the middle of the roadway, you can pass. If it's a double solid line, however, you can't pass. And if it's a solid with a dash, and you can check those in the driving manual, don't pass where it's not safe to pass. Know that passing is one of the more difficult maneuvers that you need to learn how to do. So most two-lane highways in this day and age are going to have passing lanes at a particular interval. So look for the passing lanes and try to pass at the passing lanes when you're driving on the highway. And the other thing is when you're driving on the highway, my most important piece of information that I can give you, or the best tip I can give you in terms of driving on the highway: drive in the spaces between the cluster of vehicles. If you're driving on a freeway or you're driving on a highway, it doesn't matter. You'll always notice that there's clusters of vehicles. Try and drive in the spaces between the clusters of vehicles. Okay, so a couple more questions here. Equipped with daylight running lights, but we have daylight running lights in Canada here. It is mandated on all new vehicles. Okay, so Sam is on his computer now. What's the difference between a freeway, a highway, and an interstate? Okay, a freeway and an interstate, everything are one and the same. They're both the same thing. They're both just a multi-lane, limited access highway. So multi-lanes traveling in the same direction. A highway is often two lanes of opposing traffic driving in opposite directions. Excuse me. Yeah, so that's a freeway, an interstate, and a motorway are all the same thing. Limited access highways with traffic traveling in the same direction. And freeways, interstates, and motorways tend to be safer because traffic is traveling in the same direction. Highways tend not to be as safe because you have traffic traveling in opposite directions. Okay, Aaron, you need to shoulder check minimum 2 times for every turn. You need to shoulder check every time you move the vehicle laterally, and you need to shoulder check every time you lane merge. Okay, yep. Rupert answered that question for you. All right. And yes. What time do I have? I have, where's my time? Oh, 7:48. It's 12 minutes to 8 here on the coast, on the west coast. Not on the coast, I'm in the interior of British Columbia, but Pacific Standard Time is the time here. Okay, anybody else? So going back to the question Boston asked about daylight running lights, should you drive in the daytime with your lights on? It is a good habit to get into, especially if you're driving older vehicles that don't have daylight running lights, because studies have shown that you are more visible to other traffic, and other traffic is less likely to pull out in front of you on a turn when you have your lights on. That's why Canada has mandated, and other countries as well, have mandated daylight running lights on all new vehicles. So if you get in the habit of turning your lights on during the daytime, it is a good habit to get into. And as well, most new vehicles all have a warning on them that will tell you if you get out of the vehicle that you can you simply need to turn the lights off. So I want to know how to buy a car. I'm in a okay, so buying a car. Okay, you want to try and buy something that's fairly sound. It's got decent tires on it. It runs well. It doesn't have a whole lot of miles on it. Now, if you do go and buy a car and you find a car that you like, because it tends to be a bit of an emotional response, because we like the color, we like how it drives and those types of things. I do strongly recommend that if you buy a secondhand vehicle, take it to a mechanic shop, get a mechanic to look at it and give you an assessment on the vehicle. That will ease some of your tension about buying a vehicle. So do that. Okay. So that's vehicles. And the other thing for a starter vehicle, try not buy something that's huge. Okay. I rented a vehicle last week. It was a Nissan Murano. It was a full-size SUV, and it really seemed really big after driving my Honda Civic, my Honda CR-V, which is a mid-size SUV. So yield and signal before getting out of parking space. Yes, you are, Fernando. You are supposed to do that. Okay. Move. The whole thing was about passing your road test. So, yes, there are basic skills that you have to do for road tests. So I'll just sum up here on that question because we're approaching the hour here. I like to keep these about an hour. Passing your road test. You have to be just back up. There are 4 basic components for any road test: speed management, space management, observation, and communication. Those are the 4 fundamental skills that you need for any road test. You have to obey the speed limit, the posted speed limit. So the speed that you're going to drive is the posted speed limit, the traffic flow, or the capability of the vehicle, whichever is less. So that's the first one. Space management. You have to stay away from other vehicles, other road users, and fixed objects. If you strike a fixed object on a road test, you are not going to be successful. That's an automatic fail on a road test. Observation. You have to have a scanning pattern. You have to shoulder check, and you have to be doing that scanning pattern and shoulder check. I'll go back to the scanning pattern. Scanning pattern every 10 to 15 seconds. So forward, center mirror, forward, wing mirrors, forward, instrument panel, forward. And you need to be repeating that the whole time that you're driving. Shoulder checking, 2 times for every turn, 2 times for every time you lane merge, every time for lateral movement. Communication. You have to communicate with other road users your intent of what you're doing. You have to communicate via your signals, your horn, sometimes, not very often. Communicate with appropriate hand gestures. Don't tell other drivers that they're number 1 on a road test. It's unlikely you're going to be successful. And finally, communicate by the position of your vehicle on the road test. If you're in the left turning lane, other traffic is going to expect you to turn left. So those are the 4 basic components of a road test. Maneuvers that you can be asked. Any one of these maneuvers you can be asked on a road test. Parallel parking, 3-point turn, 2-point reverse turn, reverse stall parking. Those are the big ones that you're going to need to be competent with for the purposes of the road, or for the road test rather. 7/8 of the road test is in a forward motion. 1/8 is the slow speed maneuvers and the parking. It is the 1/8 that usually gives drivers the most difficulty, and it is the 1/8, those slow speed maneuvers, that either whether you're going to ever do them again or not, demonstrate to the examiner that you have due care and control of the vehicle. And for the purposes of a road test, the only thing that you have to demonstrate to an examiner is that you have due care and control of the vehicle. That's what you need to do. And then finally, if you've done enough practice, all you have to do is take away the driving examiner's right to fail you. Nothing more, nothing less. That's all you have to do. Okay, Angel asks how to correctly back up in a diagonal parking space when there's traffic coming. The vehicle's parked to your left, limit your vision completely. Now, if it's diagonal parking, Angel, are you backing out of the space or backing into the space? Okay. Everything. How do you keep the car straight when backing up 50 feet? Now, everything, go and find an alley somewhere and back up. Practice backing up. You need to, now, that's a good question, and just giving that a bit of thought for a minute. When you back up straight with a vehicle, think of it like a missile. When they launch a missile from point A to point B, it doesn't just go to the target and hit the target. They're constantly adjusting the trajectory of that missile. It's the same thing with a car when you back up in a straight line. You're always adjusting. You're not going to just hold the steering wheel in a static position and back straight up. You're going to have to be adjusting that vehicle as you're backing up. So that's how you back up. And the other thing is you have to practice, right? And that's how you're going to get better at it. And I will tell you that reversing and backing up a vehicle will improve your overall driving skill. I'll tell you that yes, it's not sexy. It's not sexy at all to work in a parking lot and do slow speed maneuvers and do reverse figure eights and do the 2x4 exercise. But as I said again and again, it's going to improve your overall driving ability, because what it does is it teaches you how to manipulate and work the primary controls of the vehicle, and that's what you need to do for the purposes of a road test. Okay, Angel, backing out of a diagonal space. Yes, okay, so I can understand what you're saying, because it is your vision is very limited when you're backing out of a diagonal parking space. So what you have to do is you have to inch back. And you have to inch back very slowly. So go very slowly and go back. There isn't any car coming. There's no car coming. And move back a little bit more. There's no car. Come back a little bit more and come back a little car. Other people who are driving past the line of diagonal cars that are parked there understand the difficulty that you're having. If they're veteran drivers for the most part, they understand what you're doing. So as long as you go really slow and keep observing and keep looking as you're coming back until you finally get a line of sight, that's what you need to do. And so I totally understand what you're doing, but that's how you do that, is you just go slowly, very slowly, just creeping out of the space until you get a line of sight. And then when you get to your line of sight, then you take and back right out of the space. Okay, yes, going back to the question about buying a used vehicle and taking it to a mechanic, yes, you can. If you buy it from a dealer, oftentimes the dealer will let you go to a mechanic. So say, listen, I'm very interested in buying the vehicle. I'll buy the vehicle as long as it checks out on a safety and a mechanic gives me a good bill of health on the vehicle. They will. I've had experience in the past where they have let me take it to an independent mechanic, have the mechanic look at it and get a safety certificate on it. If the dealership won't do that, don't buy from them. Simply don't buy from them. And the other thing is that even people who are selling it, if they won't let you take it to a mechanic, just go somewhere else and find another vehicle, because I personally would not buy a used vehicle unless I took it to a mechanic and had a mechanic look at it. So that's that question about buying a used vehicle. Jackie, you as well, have a great day. Thank you so much for coming and your time. And we're just going to wrap up here. We've got probably time for one more question. Just have a look here and see. Okay, I think we're really good here. So that was really good. And as I said, if you have any further questions or any clarification on anything about a road test or taking your road test, by all means, leave me a comment down in the comment section. Send me an email, info@smartdrivetest.com, and I really try to get back to you within 24 hours of answering your questions and your comments and those types of things. And thank you so much for showing up to the live stream. I think it was really good and really helpful for a lot of people, and I really appreciate your time that you took to come here and show up and invest. And it really shows to me that you are definitely the smart drivers who are working to improve their skills and make our roadways safer. So thank you so much. Good luck on your road test, and remember, pick the best answer, not necessarily the right answer. Have a great night. Bye now.